At last count, there were 80 or more caregiving agencies in the Denver metro area and Colorado Front Range. With new agencies opening for business every day, the term used by the industry for one type of agency is non-medical caregiving. This means that caregivers provided by these agencies don't provide any type of medical care, but they do provide support with household tasks, like preparing meals, light housekeeping, and sometimes with errands. Non-medical caregiving companies are not reimbursable by traditional health insurance. Services are paid for with personal funds, long-term care insurance, or the low-income Medicaid waiver. A non-medical caregiving agency is very different from the second type of agency, a medical caregiving agency. Medical agencies provide caregivers with the titles of nurse, nurse practitioner, physical therapist, occupational therapist, social worker, and hospice worker. Medical agencies are provided by a physician and they're reimbursed by private insurance. So Medicare, Kaiser, Secure Horizons, and others. This means that medical caregiving agencies have very strict guidelines regarding the services that they're able to provide. If the difference still isn't clear between a non-medical caregiving agency and a medical caregiving agency, realize that this is just one of the areas in healthcare that suffers from common confusion. It's no different from trying to understand the difference between communities called assisted living, nursing homes, and rehabilitation centers, and the services that these communities provide. The subject of care communities is addressed on video in the care communities and housing section of this website. Navigating healthcare might be confusing and needing healthcare even more overwhelming. As a consumer or a client, there are aspects of non-medical and medical caregiving agencies that you should be aware of if these services and their employees are coming into your home. Realize that caregiving individuals are employees. They are not your friends, nor should you place them in the role of substitute family member. Non-medical caregiving agencies, while having some state licensing and regulatory oversight, depending on the state, have very different standards regarding hiring practices, job experience, training, criminal background checks, and literacy. These agencies typically have limited training for employees and minimal supervisory oversight. In order to survive, agencies need volume, meaning a large number of clients. Volume, though, results in challenges for the quality of care supervision and employee oversight. While medical caregiving agencies have greater licensing and regulatory oversight, issues of training and professionalism remain problematic. While it might be difficult to believe, the behaviors, actions, and requests of clients more often result in caregivers crossing professional boundaries. This means that caregivers working for non-medical or medical caregiving agencies often perform activities that are not approved by their agencies, and these caregivers form personal relationships with clients. These caregivers are well aware that performing non-approved activities, for example, giving a client their personal phone number, accepting gifts, visiting while not scheduled to work, are not activities permitted by the agency for whom they work. But because of low levels of supervision, breaches between what is allowed and not allowed frequently occur. This is the reason for stories that show up on the front page of the newspaper, screaming in large headlines and reporting caregiver abuse of older clients. It's a common story. A caregiver becomes the only person a frail elderly client sees on a regular basis. Family might be at a distance or unavailable to help. The caregiver and the client become friends. The caregiver becomes like a son or a daughter to the client. You can see where this is going. The client believes the caregiver to be trustworthy. And because there's no one else available, the client trusts the caregiver with money and financial matters. Over time, the caregiver, their name is added to car and house titles. Access is given to bank accounts. It's easy to see how this story progresses to one of financial and emotional abuse that can continue for years until someone on the outside notices and becomes involved. By this time, it's usually too late. Money, valuables, and property are long gone and can't be reconstructed or retrieved. The supervisory staff of caregiving agencies have no idea what happens on a day-to-day basis in the homes of clients. Supervisory visits should occur, but they do not. Phone calls to inquire about satisfaction levels should occur, but may not. Clients not wanting to get their caregivers into trouble hesitate to tell supervisory personnel what's really happening. Closed mouths create a circle of deception on the part of the client and the caregiver that usually ends poorly for the client, who becomes emotionally attached to a less than professional and ethical caregiver. According to an article in the Journal of American Geriatric Society called "The Hiring and Screening Practices of Agencies Supplying Paid Caregivers to Older Adults," Volume 60, page 1263, many caregivers aren't adequately prepared for the position requirements of caring for older adults. More than 1/3 of paid caregivers have inadequate health literacy and limited use of English. Most caregivers receive low wages, making clients with the financial ability to pay for services attractive targets. Agencies have poor quality screening. Training and supervisory practices are absent. The presence of an agency versus hiring one of your friends or a neighbor might provide you with a false sense of security. For families and individuals, especially when agencies talk so enthusiastically about their reputation and background, it's up to you, the client, to educate yourself about industry practices and the questions that you should ask when hiring a caregiving agency. Know that it's also your responsibility as the client to direct the agency and its caregivers in the tasks and duties that you wish to have completed. In this situation, you're the employer. Recognize that relationships with employed caregivers must be kept professional. Caregivers are agency employees. They're not substitute family, nor should they be treated as a trusted family member. The other danger in client caregiving situations is the area of advice regarding health and financial matters. Caregivers from non-medical and medical agencies are not your advisors. While some may have the title of nurse, nurse practitioner, and may be able to give clinical advice, their personal opinions have no place in a client-caregiver relationship. This is another danger area that has the potential to create huge rifts between family members when the client takes the advice of a caregiver over family or physician recommendations. As the population continues to age, the demand for medical and non-medical caregiving agencies and their employees will increase. The likelihood of abuse in this area will also increase. It's critical that you find ways to evaluate services, the backgrounds of caregiving agencies, and to find ways to ensure that outside supervision, whether the supervision be by way of another family member or a professional advocate, occurs in order to protect financial interests, health, and well-being. If you are a loved one or in a situation where non-medical or medical caregivers are providing services and you're feeling uncomfortable or dissatisfied, contact an agency supervisor to express concern. Don't remain silent. Your health and well-being depend on your ability to advocate for yourself or to hire a professional advocate. I'm Pamela Wilson of The Caring Generation, an online community of support for family and professional caregivers.